There's nothing like the buzz of an international trip. The night before we leave, suitcases line the hallway, and our dogs are usually pacing around nervously at the sight of us packing. Over the years, 35 countries and counting, we've learned that a smooth trip doesn't start at the airport. It starts days and even weeks earlier. Today we're taking you with us from doorstep to destination to share the tips, hacks, and hard-won lessons that help us land confident, well-rested, and ready to explore, whether it's your first passport stamp or your 50th. We're Scott and Melissa, the Sunshine Travelers.
We're all about exploring the world and sharing the journey with you, whether you're a seasoned traveler, dreaming of your next adventure, or just here for the stories.
No matter where you are on your travel journey, we've got firsthand experiences, tips, and plenty of inspiration from some of the most amazing places on Earth.
So buckle up and get ready to travel with us.
If you could land in a new country feeling confident, well-rested, and totally prepared, instead of jet-lagged, frazzled, and searching for Wi-Fi just to find a ride. Today we're sharing our best travel tips for international trips, and especially those long-haul flights. So whether you're planning your first trip overseas or just looking for a few new travel hacks, today we've got you covered.
So if you've ever experienced that dreaded feeling just before your big international trip of discovering that your passport is expired, you'll know exactly why we are emphasizing this first point of preparation. Because this has actually happened to me before when I was younger. I think kids' passports generally have about half the validity of an adult passport. And my mom and I were getting ready for a trip to Germany, and she looked at my passport, and we discovered that it had expired. Although we had initially gotten our passports at the same time, hers was still valid, but mine had expired. So we had to quickly find a flight to New York City so that we could go to the passport office and renew mine in person. Not how you want to start a trip. So at least 8 weeks before your trip, make sure that your passport is good for at a very minimum 6 months from the time that you return.
You're also going to want to check and see if the countries that you are visiting require a visa. Scott, it seems that more and more countries are requiring some kind of e-visa or entry authorization these days, and you need to be prepared for that. So you're going to want to use the website travel.state.gov and just check to see the visa requirements. And often this is going to point you to the correct site to where you can secure this visa. Some visas are easy and they're really like e-visas or travel authorizations, and they can be obtained digitally and in a matter of hours or days, and others require weeks, and sometimes you actually have to send off your passport to get the visa. And one thing I want to point out is even if you've been somewhere before, you need to check and be sure that they haven't instituted this. So for example, Brazil has just started their visa process earlier this year. I think it took effect in February. It does take several days to get your Brazil visa approved. Plus, you have to know that you have to print out at least 2 paper copies and keep them with you. So they're not going to accept it just on your phone or anything like that. The good thing about this one, I think it was like $70, but it is good for 10 years.
The UK is another destination that has just instituted an e-visa or travel authorization process earlier this year. It's good for 3 years or until you get a new passport, so you just kind of have to keep up with that. We got approved within hours, and there's nothing to print. It's attached to your passport electronically, and we did have some issues initially with their app that you use. However, it looks like they've gotten those resolved, and it had to do with they wanted you to scan the chip in your passport, and we couldn't get that to work. But in recent, we've tried again and see now that it works.
Yeah, Scott, I actually had to get another one. I had gotten a new passport just this year and had to get that again. And it worked this second time. So I do want to warn you, though, this UK one is one that I've heard of a lot of people go into the wrong website. I do think it's best that you download the app. And again, like I mentioned, that travel.state.gov will point you to the correct site. But I've heard of people paying double and even triple for it to be a scam site, and they never got anything. So just be aware of that. The EU is actually supposed to implement their e-visa program in 2026. They pushed it off a couple of times. And then a couple of the other entry authorizations that were a little different that we've dealt with are places like Aruba and Curacao. You had to do it ahead of time. It was actually free on those, but you had to do it ahead of time. But they did ask for it when we checked in at the airport. So just go to that travel.state.gov and then just make sure that you understand what is being required. So how will you know? So again, for those of you with U.S. passports, the best way to stay on top of this is go to that travel.state.gov, and then you click on international travel, which is kind of in the middle, and then pick the country that you're going to or the countries that you're going to, and then just carefully read those requirements. And so, Scott, let's just go back to what we originally started talking about. It's not just that you're going to be back in the U.S. before that passport expires. Sometimes you have to have 6 months after your travel dates. And here you're also going to find how many blank pages you might need in order to enter a country. And so, Scott, I think some of this goes back to when all countries had stamps and sometimes they had a visa they had to put in there. But I would hate to get caught and they said, oh, well, you can't enter it because you don't have enough pages. So just be aware of that as well.
Yeah, we've never seen that be enforced. Matter of fact, I think when we went to Africa and went to all those different countries, you had actually put sticky notes saying, please do not use on certain pages.
Yeah, because we had 3 countries, and I think I had 6 blank pages, and they each said that I had to have 2 consecutive pages for that. But then a lot of times, so I ended up with plenty of pages, but I will say I was a little bit nervous because if they happened to just turn and stamp something random, I could have, had a problem. All right. One other thing that you're going to want to check to see is if you need any special vaccines, and you'll also find this information there. And if you're traveling to more than one country during your trip, you also want to check to just make sure that even if a vaccine isn't required in one of the countries, sometimes when you travel to another country from somewhere else, it might be required.
Hey there, Sunshine Travelers. If you love finding incredible travel experiences without overpaying, you've got to check out Travel Deal Insiders.
It's our 3-time weekly newsletter where we send you the best cruise, resorts, all-inclusive, tours, and other really cool travel deals we find, with a few cheap flight deals thrown in too. Handpicked and curated, no spam, no fluff.
We dig through the offers every week and send you only the best. Think luxury for less cruises, last-minute getaways, and travel tips to help you book smarter so that you can travel more.
Join now for just $5 a month. That's a savings of $24 a year.
Let's be real. Booking just one deal could save you so much. It makes this $5 membership like a total steal. We're talking 50 times, even 100 times, and more the value right back into your pocket.
Head to sunshinetravelers.com/deals and enter the code podcast to get this exclusive listener deal.
Travel more, spend less, skip the search. We'll see you inside.
And so let me just give you an example of that. When we went to Kenya, the yellow fever vaccine was recommended, but it wasn't required. But we were traveling from there to South Africa, and South Africa requires that if you have traveled to Kenya, then you do have to have that vaccine. And so those travel vaccines are usually stamped or written on a special yellow form. And so when you go to get those, probably the best place, the most inexpensive place, is going to be to the local health department where they actually have those readily available, and they will have that form. And that was something that we did have to show at the airport when we checked in for our flight to South Africa.
We would also recommend that you get travel insurance. At a very minimum, understand what is covered by the credit card you booked each part of your travel on. Personally, we have the Allianz yearly plan since we take several trips a year, and that includes travel emergency medical insurance. We also have Global Rescue, which is a membership for emergency medical evacuation. So if they had to evacuate you from somewhere for medical purposes, this is covered under that. And it's just about being prepared in case while you're traveling. We have several friends who have had to use this while traveling, and they talk about how expensive it would have been had they not had these plans.
Yeah, and Scott, one thing I want to point out about that Allianz yearly plan, we've actually carried that for a few years now since we do take several trips a year. One of the first ones where the company required that we have some kind of travel insurance that include travel medical was when we went to the Galapagos. And we knew we were going to take a couple of other trips that year. So I just went onto the Allianz website because it's super easy to do. Checked like just for that trip versus like the whole year, and it was just a little bit more. I mean, I think they kind of count on you're not going to like have a claim for every single trip, and that's why, but that can just really save you a lot of money versus doing individual trips. Now, I will say it's not for somebody who is traveling full time. They do have a certain number of days, etc., that count, but just something that you may not be aware of that you might want to look into.
And so let's talk about a few more things to check off your list before you go. And Melissa, let's jump into these quickly because there's a few of them that we want to cover. The first is make sure to call or message your bank in their secure messaging portal and set a travel alert. This is especially important if you're going to get money out of an ATM using your debit card. One thing that I absolutely would not recommend is that you use your debit card like a regular credit card while traveling. I think that's just generally a bad idea because if something happens, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, for sure. And I haven't found it necessary to do the alerts and message them for our credit cards, but definitely recommend, again, you doing this for your debit card because there's nothing worse than having to call your bank and try to sort that out if you're needing to get money, usually quickly, out of an ATM. And trust us, this has happened to us a couple of times. One time in Belize, we were trying to do an excursion, and it wasn't anything sketchy or anything like that where we were, worried about paying cash for that. It was something we did last minute, but we were booking it through the hotel. Then having to call and message the bank and get them to understand that we were trying to get money out. And I think that's happened to us in Mexico too. And I can understand why. So just make sure that you let your bank know that you're going to be using those.
You're probably going to want to have more than one travel credit card and make sure that at least one of those is a Visa credit card. Visa is everywhere you want to be. So that's their slogan. And some of the places we go to don't accept American Express. And we had that just recently when we were in Ireland. I would also say make sure that they don't have foreign transaction fees. There's a lot of these travel cards out there which do not have these foreign transaction fees on them. And so make sure that you have those when traveling. And then when you are charging something, it may come back and ask you if you want to do that in the local currency or US dollars. Always choose the local currency.
So occasionally that'll happen on the transaction machine or the point of sale systems, but occasionally it'll happen at the ATM too. But always, in all those cases, do that in the local currency. And Scott, going back to what you said real quick about not using a debit card everywhere, I think that's just a really great tip, is because a lot of times they'll do holds. Anytime you check into a hotel, they'll put a hold on it for incidentals and things like that. And so if you're going in and out of several hotels, having to worry about making sure you have enough on that debit card, a credit card is just a good and a safer way to do that.
You're also going to want to make sure you have both digital and physical copies of your passport. So scan it and print a copy of it and store that somewhere that you'd be able to access it. That way, if something happens to your passport while you're traveling, you'll have a copy of it that you can take to the local U.S. Embassy. You might want to give a copy of it to someone back at home so that you could reach them and have them fax that to you or email it to you. Kind of got old school there for a minute with the fax, didn't I? But, that you can get a copy. We talk about storing it in an iCloud or Google Drive, or even sending an email to yourself so that you would be able to access that in case, you lost your phone and needed to just log into your email or to get that copy.
Another thing you want to do specifically if you're going to be driving is to download the offline Google map, because you just don't know what your service coverage is going to be like. And so do that ahead of time, because you basically have to download those on like a Wi-Fi network. So look and see where you're going to be driving and just go ahead and download those to your phone.
And speaking of driving in a foreign country, is you're going to want to make sure that you don't need an international driver's license. So go back to travel.state.gov and go to their international travel tab and then scroll down to transportation, and they'll list the countries where you need to have one of these international driving permits. Another place that you can also look at that is on AAA, but Melissa, I think you said that the travel.state.gov was just a lot more clear.
Yeah, so AAA is actually where you will get that international driver's license. Whether or not you have like AAA membership or not, you go to a local AAA office. There's a form that you can download, and we'll put the link to their information about that. But there's a form you download and fill out. You take your driver's license, and you get that international driver's permit. And I think it's only like $20 for an entire year. The thing that I found is it wasn't super clear. They just had all these countries listed where they would accept it, but not where you had to use it. So on that travel.state.gov, you go to the specific countries. And let me just tell you, for example, I found that Spain, for example, says that you must obtain an international driving permit prior to your arrival in Spain. It says permits are valid for 1 year and that you have to have those or there would be a fine and you could get the rental car impounded and all these different things. Whereas Germany says that you're fine on a regular driver's license for up to 6 months. So just go and check that out and make sure. And so that just goes to show you it's not like, okay, all the countries in the EU are the same. You just need to go country by country and see what those requirements are and see if you need to do that. And Scott, this is something that we have been needing to do. So our takeaway, I think, from this episode is the next time that we're together is go into that local AAA office and taking care of that, just so that we'll have that box checked.
The last thing we would say is about your cell phone. You probably want to look at either getting an international plan squared away or get an international eSIM before you leave on your trip. We love using GigSky, and if you go back to episode 82, we cover that in a lot of detail, so I'm going to save you some of those details, and you can go back and listen to it in that episode. We have found, though, recently, plans like T-Mobile have started offering 15 gigabyte of global data on select plans and in participating countries. And we used that when we were recently in Ireland. And for me, it was plenty. I had plenty enough for the little over a week that we were there.
Yeah, so I know a lot of the other providers charge like $10 a day for their international plans. And so in those cases, an eSIM could save you a lot of money, especially if you're paying that for a couple, or if you're taking your whole family. Having that eSIM could just save you a ton.
Yeah, well, go check out GigSky anyway, because they have packages that include your land, air, your sea, right? So while you're on the cruise ship, they have packages. So just check that out. We would highly recommend them. Let's talk about flying halfway across the world. You know, a 10-plus hour flight can really ruin your first few days unless you're prepared. And I found this out firsthand. About 6 years ago, you and I went on a 6-week trip to Europe, and when we got there, you did a jet lag procedure that we'll talk about in just a minute. You kind of got into the normal rhythm and into the normal schedule pretty quickly. I did not. I spent the first few nights just roaming the cruise ship all night long like a zombie because I was so jet lagged.
Yeah, so back several episodes, we actually talked about what we used to do, which was a kind of a jet lag procedure that ended up working very well for us. Now, I will say, Scott, after that trip, you were like, whatever you're doing, I'm going to try doing that. And so basically what we had found, I had read about, it was a pressure point system that you could use to kind of reset your circadian rhythm. And I had found an app called Uplift that actually walks you through that. You put in your information about where you're traveling from and to, and it gives you a very quick circadian rhythm reset. So we had been using that along with kind of making sure that we didn't sleep the first day, and we tried to get on the new time zone as quickly as possible and stay hydrated and, get sunlight and walk around. And it really worked out really well until we found out about a system called FlyKit.
And so FlyKit, the founder of it, was working with the U.S. Navy SEALs. And basically he was dealing with a situation where at times they would be deployed on like submarines. They would be across time zones, and they had a lot of effects from being in that pressurized environment and changing those time zones. And so he found ways to help them battle the inflammation that comes from that pressurization. And quickly he realized that if it worked underwater, why wouldn't it work in the air? And so he started adapting this program, and it's a multi-part program. So you're using an app that tells you things like when to sleep, when to eat a little bite, when to take some supplements that are included in the program. And these supplements are basically designed to help your body fight inflammation. There's also some that help you to sleep well. They call them Mellow, but I think it's basically melatonin that's in that supplement pack. And then blue light blocking glasses. So right before you go to sleep, they have you put these glasses on, and it helps your body just get into that state of relaxation and be ready to go to sleep. And I've used it now on multiple 10-plus hour flights and not a bit of jet lag. And that is just amazing because I used to suffer from jet lag so bad.
And so you can go and download the FlyKit app for free. And so it would basically tell you, here's where you would take these supplements, but it would also tell you, hey, here's where you need to sleep, here's when you need to eat a little snack, and put on the blue light glasses. And it just helps you so much to kind of get on that schedule. And then of course you can order the kit, which has all those things, and the supplements that it recommends, like Scott said, to fight inflammation, to help you reset your circadian rhythm as well. So here's a quick rundown of our long haul flight survival kit. So of course the number 1 is FlyKit. Number 2 is noise canceling headphones. And Scott, even now the new AirPods that have the noise canceling, I think that helps so much to not have just that whooshing flight noise in your ears. We also love the iFly. You plug it into the entertainment system. It connects to your headphones via Bluetooth, and so you don't have the cord. Also compression socks. You can buy some through FlyKit, but lots of people sell those, but just having a pair of those just helps with your circulation and of course your swelling and your inflammation too. We have found that having a refillable water bottle, start with it full of water. Of course, after you go through TSA, fill it up in the water fountain or water bottle or at the lounge or something like that. And having that to either take your supplements or your melatonin, but just to stay hydrated. Melatonin or magnesium for sleep, an eye mask. Snacks are huge to just help your blood sugar and just stay fueled up, even if it's just something small. A power bank and all the cords that you need, because there's nothing worse than getting to your destination and you don't have your maps, you don't have addresses, all that kind of stuff. And then of course, recently we have loved traveling with electrolyte packets. The one that we really like is Element. It's LMNT. And just having that and staying hydrated just helps you so much.
One pro tip is to set your watch to the arrival time zone when you board your flight. Now, if you're like me and you have an Apple Watch and it's tied to your phone, not as easy to do, but if you do have just a standard watch, go ahead and roll that forward to the correct time zone. And that way you'll know, like, hey, it's 10 p.m. I should be thinking about going to sleep, and helping you get on to that new schedule. But if you do FlyKit, the app will tell you with all of the adjusted time frames, and it'll also send you alerts and tell you when you need to sleep, when you need to take a supplement, when you need to eat a snack, when you need to do the circadian rhythm reset, right? It tells you all of these things.
And Scott, I personally just think that following that schedule helps out so much. And it just helps you feel so much better. And one of the other big things that I would say is a lot of times if you get on that overnight international flight, and let's say you're leaving at like 10:30 at night, a lot of times they want to feed you, but like an hour into it. So you've got to be thinking, okay, would you even eat that late in the current time zone? And then you certainly wouldn't be eating, like that's in the middle of the night. So just thinking about some of those things and how are some of those things going to make you feel? And then also consuming a lot of alcohol, for example, how is that going to just interact with your system and how is that going to make you feel for that jet lag?
So, Melissa, let's talk about some of our go-to apps that we use when traveling. The first one, I'll start out, is Google Translate. You can even download some of the languages offline so that it works in case you don't have access to data where you're at. But I used this when we were in Berlin with our driver. He didn't speak German. He didn't speak English. I tried to see if he spoke Spanish. Come to find out he spoke Turkish. And I know absolutely nothing about Turkish, but I pulled out Google Translate. I changed it from English to Turkish, and we carried on a conversation. Well, he picks up his phone and does the same thing to get to English, and we actually talked for about 20 minutes while riding down the road, and he even gave us places that we need to go to in Turkey. And so it was a great tool that we had available to us, and it just created a connection with that local.
Yeah, that was really cool. I even, marked a lot of those places in my Google Maps and stuff like that. But, that's just an interaction that I don't think that we'll ever forget. So definitely have that Google Translate at the ready. The second thing that I have used for several years now is an app called TripIt. Now they have a free version, and I've actually been using the pro version for probably a year and a half, because it just has a lot more capability. It actually keeps up with your flight updates and sometimes even lets you know, oh, your flight's going to be delayed, or if there's a gate change even before the airline does, which is really, really cool. But it just has a great way to, it just like immediately when you book something, it coordinates with your email and all your documents are immediately in there. And so it just makes it super handy to use for travel.
We also like to use an app called Get Your Guide or Viator for choosing local experiences. So like tours when you're in a location. You can even use it for booking transportation as well. So, for example, if you want a transportation from the airport to the resort where you're staying, you can go in and usually find that in one of these apps. So we recommend that for your local experiences.
Now, there's an app that we used to use a lot called XE Currency, but now simply the calculator on an iPhone makes it super easy to convert your currencies. So go to your calculator and you click at the bottom left that you want to toggle conversions, and then you're able to convert to and from US dollars to anything else and other currencies. And so it just makes it super quick and easy to figure out how much you're spending and what things are costing as well.
And then we have WhatsApp, or as I've heard it also referred to as WhatsApp. Trust us, this is how most of the world communicates. When we have gone into all of these various countries around the world, hotels, restaurants, you name it, they all use WhatsApp for communications. And so this is something that if you're traveling outside the U.S., you probably want to have this on your phone, because chances are wherever you're going, they're going to be using WhatsApp.
Yeah, so just go ahead and get your account set up. And it might be a good idea if your family back home is using it too, but you can set up groups as well. So you can let, your whole family know what's going on during your travel. So it just makes it a super easy way to communicate.
And then we also use Uber, Lyft, Bolt, depending on which country. I do recommend that you research this ahead of time so that you know what the local rideshare app is, because, Uber isn't in every country around the world, and they may use something like Bolt instead, or Find My Taxi, or whatever the app is. So do a little research ahead of time and figure out what the local ride-sharing app is, or if they have one. And then that way, when you get there, you already have this downloaded, you already have it set up, and you can just go ahead and get your ride on the way. You don't make the best decisions when you aren't very fresh. And so having to negotiate the rate with the taxi or convert the currency and try to figure out if they're telling you right, you're just less likely to get scammed if you have one of these apps set up and you know how much you're paying.
And Scott, one thing that I found out actually when I was doing a little bit more research for this episode about transportation and the international driver's license and stuff like that is that travel.state.gov under that transportation for whatever country also lets you know which forms of transportation are acceptable for locals and which ones are good for tourists. So it might be good just to go and take a look at that. For example, one that I just happened to see for Botswana was that it says that locals typically use a low-cost cash-only combis, but it's not really acceptable or safe for tourists to use those. And then they went into the description about what tourists should do. And I also ran into that when I was traveling with my sister in Guatemala. A lot of locals travel in what they call these chicken buses, which are our old school buses, but they're not really designed for tourists and it's probably not really safe to do that. Instead, it's better to hire a van. So that just gave some really good information. And the other thing I wanted to point out that we've kind of run into a couple of times, in addition to maybe taking the Uber, Lyft, Bolt, whatever the local is that sometimes you might be more inclined to go ahead and pre-book your arrival transportation ahead of time, just so that it's completely not a hassle. One of the things we shared in an episode that we did with about Cancun is this is a place where we kind of like to do that. There's a lot going on at the airport. There's people trying to get you into timeshare presentations and all these different things. And it's just nice to get out there and not have to worry about waiting around. They have your name on the list. They may have your name on the card and just getting you, directly to where you want to go. We also found this out recently in Rome. It wasn't really as much about not, knowing the transportation and that kind of thing, but then finding the train and how long would we have to wait for the train. And then once we got to the train station, lugging our luggage. And I told you after all that, we ended up paying more for the train than I thought it was going to be. I said, you know what? We actually could have rented a car that would have dropped us off right at the door. And so just thinking about some of those things, sometimes that might be cheaper, sometimes that might be more for convenience, and sometimes that might end up being the same price. So just thinking through kind of those arrival options to get your bearings, to get rested, and then venture out, with some of these other transportation options.
So there are a few things that we have learned from our experiences that we want to share with you as well. And these are really just quick things to keep in the back of your mind or to put on your travel list.
All right. So if you don't get any other tip out of this episode, it is to always carry a pack of tissues with you, especially in places like Italy. For some reason, you go to all these bathrooms in whatever, and they don't ever seem to have any toilet paper. That's just an example. I know people have talked about that in places in Asia and different squatty potties and different things like that. But a pack of tissues literally might save your day.
You also want to pack a pen just in case you're on that flight and they start passing out the old school customs forms. That does still happen from time to time, and usually they have like 2 pens for the whole plane, so it's good to just have a pen with you for those circumstances. And then we would also say one of the things that we highly recommend is learning a few local phrases. And that really goes a long way when you're in someone else's culture. Things like hello, goodbye, please, thank you. So like in France, for example, when you walk into a shop, it's customary for the person going in to greet the shop owner or the shop worker. And, when you don't, you just come across as rude. So we just highly recommend that you learn a few of these things when you're traveling, and people really do appreciate it. We've talked a lot about that when we were in Kenya. They really wanted to teach us the Swahili. But in other places, just knowing those few little phrases might be enough to get them interested in trying to dialogue with you in English.
And I would just say too, because I'm the world's worst on pronunciation, but I feel like just to do your very best. I think that goes so far. And Scott, one other one I think I would add to the list is maybe how to ask for the check, please. If you're in a country where it's not like brought automatically, like we're so used to.
I tell you, it seems to be a universal hand sign that if you just kind of hold up one hand and use the other like you're writing, they all know that means the check. And then finally, I would say is don't try to do too much on the first day when you arrive. Get outside, get some sunlight, get some fresh air. We highly, highly, highly recommend that you don't go straight to the hotel and take a nap. That is going to wreck you from a jet lag perspective. If for some reason you just absolutely can't make it to the end of the day and you have to do this, set an alarm and don't give yourself more than an hour. Just get that hour, get up, get a shower, go outside, get dinner, and then after dinner you can come back to the hotel and go to sleep. And I promise you that's going to be so much more effective with your jet lag.
One other thing I would add that I think we've talked about recently for day one is, unless you don't have any other way to do it, is don't book a tour on that first day. If you get delayed, it might not be refundable, but a lot of times you just don't have that mental capacity to do something like that right when you arrive.
So to get our free travel prep guide, go to sunshinetravelers.com/travel prep, or on sunshinetravelers.com, you can go to guides and the free travel prep guide will be listed with all of our other guides. Just say finally, our golden rule is expect a little chaos. You are in a new country. Things will work differently. Just roll with it. It's part of the experience. Every passport stamp starts with preparation. But the best memories happen beyond the checklist. The laughter you share with a stranger, a sunset that you didn't plan for. And if you're a big planner, make the plans, but make sure you leave a little space for wonder. What's your favorite international travel hack? DM us on Instagram at Sunshine Travelers Podcast, or send me an email, scott@sunshinetravelers.com, and let us know. And as always, remember that the world is full of sunshine and surprises. Make 2025 the year that you explore beyond the familiar. That's a wrap on this episode. We hope it gave you some inspiration for your next adventure.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others find us and keeps the travel conversations going.
Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss a new episode.
And come hang out with us on Instagram or Facebook at Sunshine Travelers Podcast. That's Travelers with 1 L.
Most importantly, share this episode with a friend. You never know, they just might become your next great travel companion.